Welcome to this explainer. I want to start by just acknowledging something right off the bat. You're probably here because you are exhausted. Completely exhausted from trying again and again to break the exact same behavioral loops only to find yourself right back where you started. Well, let's really dive into this today because what we're going to uncover is going to radically validate your experience, and honestly, it's going to change how you see yourself entirely. You probably know exactly what you need to stop doing. You've identified the pattern, right? You've seen the damage it causes. You've made that promise to yourself so clearly and sincerely that this time is going to be different. And then, almost without even noticing, you do it again. It's the same fight, the same drink, the same person, the same way of just disappearing when things get hard. It is immensely frustrating to be so incredibly self-aware, to literally watch the damage happening and yet feel completely powerless to stop the repetition. So in the silence afterwards, you ask yourself the exact same question millions of people ask themselves every single day. Why can't I just break this? Well, I want you to hear this very clearly. The answer psychology has found has absolutely nothing to do with your willpower. It has nothing to do with discipline, and it certainly has nothing to do with some kind of character flaw or how badly you want to change. Which brings us to part one, the nature of deep patterns and understanding where they actually come from. See, the fundamental problem here isn't that you lack the desire to change, but rather there is a profound misunderstanding of how the brain categorizes our behaviors. We're often out there fighting the wrong battle with the wrong tools because we completely misunderstand what we're actually fighting against. What you've been calling a bad habit isn't actually a habit at all. Habits are surface-level behaviors. It's brushing your teeth, your morning coffee routine, the specific route you drive home. They live in the conscious brain, and you can change them with a relatively simple amount of effort. But what you are trying to break is a pattern. And patterns are preconscious. They activate deep in the brain for the sake of survival, long before your thinking mind even has the time to weigh in on the situation. By the time you notice that urge to pull away or send that text you really shouldn't send, the pattern is already running. And this brings us to some genuinely fascinating developmental neuroscience. According to the research of Dr. Bruce Perry and the core principles of polyvagal theory, these deep patterns are not stored in your prefrontal cortex. That's the rational, planning part of your brain. Instead, they're encoded much, much deeper, way down in the limbic system and the brainstem. These are the ancient, primal centers of our brain that are entirely dedicated to regulating survival, danger, and safety. And because these patterns live in those older brain regions, they literally do not read self-help books. They just don't respond to logic or reasoning at all. They respond to one thing, and one thing only: felt safety. If your nervous system does not feel physically and emotionally safe, absolutely no amount of rationalizing is going to stop that pattern from firing. So let's move into part two, intelligent survival adaptations, and how we need to reframe our response. This is exactly where we need to completely reframe the shame you might be carrying right now, because every single recurring pattern in your adult life almost certainly originated as a highly strategic solution to a problem your nervous system encountered when you were just a child. Just notice how the dots connect here. Withdrawing emotionally when things get tense? Well, maybe staying small and quiet was exactly how you avoided drawing dangerous attention to yourself, or how you survived a parent's unpredictable rage. Picking the wrong partner over and over? Often that's just your nervous system trying to recreate a totally familiar dynamic. Not because you actually want pain, but because familiar pain literally feels safer to your brain than unfamiliar peace. And self-sabotaging right when things are finally going well? That protected you from crushing disappointment in an environment where good things were entirely unreliable. See, these were the absolute most sophisticated, intelligent solutions a small brain could generate to survive some genuinely difficult conditions. So the crucial takeaway here is that these are not character flaws. They are highly intelligent biological adaptations. The problem isn't that they exist. The problem is simply that your nervous system doesn't know they're no longer needed. You are essentially just running an outdated software program that once saved your life. This leads us perfectly into part three, why willpower always fails, or the biological roadblock we hit. If you're an intelligent, incredibly self-aware person, it is absolutely agonizing to watch your willpower fail so consistently against these loops. You understand them intellectually, you hate them emotionally, and yet they just happen anyway. But there is a deeply biological reason why just stopping never ever works. The thinking part of your brain, that prefrontal cortex, has roughly the same authority over your patterns that a passenger has over a driver. Your rational passenger can sit there and suggest new routes, complain about the speed, and write elaborate travel plans. But when the road gets dangerous, the lower brain, the survival driver, is the one who is actually steering the car. Telling yourself, I'm not going to do this anymore, is exactly like a passenger telling the driver to go take a scenic route through what the driver's muscle memory firmly believes is an active war zone. The driver might completely agree intellectually, but when the trigger fires and your stress crosses a certain threshold, that old route just runs completely automatically because it genuinely thinks it is keeping you alive. Not because you're weak, not because you don't actually want to change, but because the part of your brain that runs that route speaks the language of survival, not the language of decision-making. Okay, so how do we actually fix this? Part 4, how real change happens through corrective experiences. So if willpower and intellect clearly don't work, what actually does? Well, we have to shift away from just psychoeducation and move to a solution deeply rooted in trauma-informed neuroscience. Insight and analysis alone are simply not enough to rewire the brain. And this is exactly why traditional therapy that focuses purely on understanding why you do something so often leaves you as just a powerless observer of your own patterns. You can perfectly understand your childhood and still sit there and watch yourself enact the exact same self-sabotage. Why? Because your nervous system requires repeated, physical proof of safety. Patterns only change through what we call a corrective experience. See, your nervous system learned its current patterns through repeated experiences that the old behavior kept you safe. The only way to teach it something new is through repeated experience that a different behavior also works. The change happens in the body, not the head. True rewiring is a very physical process. It happens in those tiny, microscopic moments when you notice the old urge, you pause for just one breath longer than usual, you choose something slightly different, and you survive it. You suddenly realize no actual catastrophe occurred. So let's break this down into part 5, the 3 steps to change, a really practical framework we can use. This is the highly practical, body-based framework that trauma-informed psychology uses to actually create lasting change. It's really just 3 steps. Notice the pattern, make small deviations, and celebrate the deviation. By organizing it this way, we take something that feels overwhelmingly complex and turn it into a totally achievable biological process. So let's walk through exactly how each of these steps works in real life. Step 1 is all about noticing the pattern, but doing it with curiosity instead of judgment. I really want to reassure you here. The very moment you catch yourself in the old behavior, you absolutely have to stop attacking yourself for it. Self-attack just drives shame, and shame creates dysregulation, which literally triggers your brain to repeat the pattern even harder. Instead, try to observe yourself with genuine curiosity. Ask yourself, hey, what actually triggered this? And what is this pattern still trying to protect me from? Step 2 is brilliantly practical. You're going to make small deviations, not sweeping revolutions. The brain accepts small changes so much more readily because they don't set off massive survival alarm bells. So instead of making these grand, sweeping promises to never withdraw again, your goal is just to stay present for maybe 30 extra seconds during a really difficult conversation. Then eventually 60 seconds. Then maybe 2 minutes. Every single successful deviation rewires the pattern slightly. Keep it small, slow, and repeatable. And step 3, and please do not skip this one, is to celebrate the deviation, no matter how tiny it was. I say this with so much warmth. This is not some kind of self-help fluff. Your nervous system literally learns through reward signals. When you manage to do something differently and nothing bad happens, you absolutely must pause and consciously let that success register in your physical body. Because that is the exact biological mechanism for how your brain files away new evidence of safety. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to internalize this core truth. You are not broken. You are not failing at discipline, and you're not failing at willpower. You are simply a remarkably loyal, highly functioning nervous system that learned a brilliant way to stay safe a very long time ago. The work going forward isn't to fight the pattern. The work is to gently, patiently show your nervous system that the world has changed, that you are no longer the small person who desperately needed those patterns, and that making different choices can actually be safe now. So I'd love for you to just take a moment right now and reflect. What is the pattern you are quietly working on changing? Acknowledging it completely without judgment is the very first step toward that corrective experience. Remember, every tiny, small moment of doing something slightly different is a real, tangible deposit into a future where that old program no longer runs your life. This isn't a fast process, but it is a biological reality. So be remarkably patient with yourself. Remember, the world has changed, and so have you. Your evolution is worth protecting.